Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Quick Burt Games, where we cover all the latest information regarding TT Games' LEGO series. And this time we're going to be talking about LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, which is the upcoming LEGO Star Wars game coming at some point this year, probably this summer or possibly this spring in April. We're not sure yet. It was revealed last year at E3 2019 with the big trailer at Microsoft's press conference, and we got another trailer at the release of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the content within the game and some new content that could possibly come. So what I mean by that is we've played through most of the content in this game already in LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga and the first two games that make up the Complete Saga game, the video game and the original trilogy. And, you know, we had levels covering episodes 1 through 6 in those games, and of course 7, 8, and 9 are going to be covered in the Skywalker Saga. But there's some things that were not shown in the original Complete Saga game that I'd like to see in the Skywalker Saga game. So there's some segments from the movies, even some action scenes even, that we didn't see in the Complete Saga. So we're going to be breaking down some levels and content that we'd like to see in LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga that wasn't in the Complete Saga or the previous games that make up the Complete Saga. So most of the new content that I'll be suggesting here comes from the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3. I do have one suggestion for episode 4. Episodes 4, 5, and 6, you know, from LEGO Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, they all had quite a bit of content already. The levels were a lot longer in that game. But for the prequels, the levels were really short, so some things from the movies got cut. So in this video, again, we're going to be covering mostly new content that I'd like to see from the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3. So the first thing I'd like to see is the Darth Maul fight with Qui-Gon Jinn on Tatooine. So this scene was not shown in the game at all in the original video game or in the Complete Saga. You know, it was very brief in the movie, but I think it would still make up a significant level. So I think they could do this by maybe expanding the pod race level. So this fight occurs right after the pod race level as, you know, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are trying to leave Tatooine and get the heck out of there. And then Darth Maul, of course, kind of ambushes them and attacks them there. So I'd like to see this fight maybe after the Tatooine level. They could expand the pod race section, and then you could have a section afterwards where you're fighting Qui-Gon. And although the fight is pretty brief in the movie, they could of course expand it. You know, if you look back at especially The Force Awakens, a lot of you guys complain that, you know, insignificant scenes are kind of expanded upon really big. And they could kind of do the same thing here where, you know, the fight was very brief in episode 1 against Darth Maul there in Tatooine, but they could make it a lot longer to where maybe Obi-Wan is your partner, because you'd have to have, in LEGO games, of course, you always have to have 2 playable characters at least to support the drop-in, drop-out co-op. So I'm thinking they could change it a bit to where Obi-Wan is actually out there with Qui-Gon and you can both fight them together, and maybe there's different segments of the fight. But that's the first thing I like to see, the Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul fight on Tatooine. So then in episode 2, I think they could expand the first level. So in the original Complete Saga, we had Bounty Hunter Pursuit, which was added in the Complete Saga. It wasn't in the original LEGO Star Wars, the video game, but I think they could expand this level to maybe have non-vehicle segments. So in the Complete Saga, it's just one big vehicle level where you're chasing Zam Wesell throughout the planet. And I think they could have non-vehicle sections where maybe you're jumping on the different car speeders. Because, you know, in the movie, Obi-Wan does like this big drop, and maybe they could implement a free-falling section, which we've seen in some LEGO games. I think that was even in LEGO Star Wars The Clone Wars, if I'm not mistaken. But they could have maybe a section where you're kind of free-falling as Obi-Wan or something, and you're kind of collecting studs that you're falling down, then eventually you land on Anakin's speeder and stuff like that. So I think they could expand that level just to have non-vehicle sections, just to add a little bit more to it and add a little bit more meat to the level. And then another thing I'd like to see in episode 2 is a level maybe involving Anakin's mother, or maybe they could even put this in between the levels or something like that, because we know there's only going to be 5 levels per episode in the Skywalker Saga. But I'm thinking they could have a scene involving Anakin's mother where, you know, maybe you see Anakin's mother die and, you know, her eyes turn to X's, just like, you know, most LEGO games, that when a character dies, their eyes turns into X's, kind of like Qui-Gon when Darth Maul killed him and stuff like that. So I'd like to see a level maybe where you see Anakin's mother die, and then there's a section where you're going throughout the Sand People Tusken Raider village and you're just slaughtering them all. You know, of course, they can make it a little bit more fun because this is a LEGO game that kind of got to make it, you know, E for everyone or E plus 10 for everyone. So maybe they could have a section where you're taking down all the Tusken Raiders. And of course, they could make it a little bit, you know, less dark than it was in the movie because, of course, Anakin's all angry and kind of unleashing the dark side there. But they could change it to where you're just kind of going throughout the village on Tatooine, taking out all the Tusken Raiders. They could actually expand that into a whole level, you know, if you made the village huge, you know, for the level or something, even though it was a very brief scene in the movie. But I think it's a very important scene for Anakin, and it's kind of a shame they left it out in the original games. Okay, so moving on to Episode 3, there's a lot of stuff that they left out in the original Episode 3 from the Complete Saga and LEGO Star Wars, the video game, that I'd love to see in this game. You know, significant action scenes even that they left out, so it's kind of crazy that they left this stuff out. But the first thing I'd like to see is an expanded General Grievous boss fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because if you replay that level now, it is a very brief level. Like, you can beat that level in probably like 3 minutes if you know what you're doing. You know, you're fighting with Obi-Wan, and then you're attacking General Grievous, and then you gotta switch to Commander Cody to shoot some things with his blaster, and it's just very brief. So I think they could expand it to have the first section where General Grievous is surrounded by the droids and he's fighting Grievous, so they could have a boss fight there, and they can maybe keep Commander Cody as your partner, because, you know, you've always got to have 2 players. And then maybe they could implement a vehicle riding section where you're riding the dragon alien. I forget what the alien's name is. Someone in the comments tell me what the alien that Obi-Wan rides in during the General Grievous boss fight, Episode 3. So after you fight General Grievous initially, they could maybe have a section where you're riding and chasing General Grievous on his little vehicle, and then it ends up into the fight where the original level of Episode 3 in the original Complete Saga game ends up, and then you're fighting General Grievous. And maybe they even take away your lightsaber to make it more movie accurate, and then you can only use a blaster against Grievous, and maybe something else happens to where Commander Cody gets taken out. I don't know, they could figure something like this out, but I think they can make it closer to the movie, expand upon it a bit, where you're fighting General Grievous both at the beginning area where he's surrounded by droids on Utapau, and then there's a vehicle section, and then you go into what the original level was and finish off Grievous maybe just with a blaster, just to make it a little bit closer to the movie. So then another big scene that could have in Episode 3 is the Mace Windu and his team of Jedi Masters against Palpatine. I cannot believe they didn't include this scene in the original game, but this fight could be pretty cool, so they could actually make this boss fight pretty long. You could have it maybe start out in different sections, you know, kind of how LEGO games have. They kind of expand scenes from movies and make them much longer. They could do that with this. So maybe the first section you're playing is Mace Windu, and you've got Kit Fisto and all the other Jedi Masters with you, and you have to do different things to take down Palpatine's health. After that, there could be maybe a cutscene where Kit Fisto and the rest of the Jedi Masters die, but you'd still have to have at least one Jedi with you. Maybe they could make it so Anakin's maybe fighting with you, because Anakin shows up later in that scene in the movie. So maybe they could change it and expand upon it a bit, and, you know, they have to change things a little bit to allow for the co-op partner stuff. We've seen this throughout all the LEGO games, you know, not just Star Wars, but Harry Potter and stuff like that. So they can maybe change it to where Mace Windu, after the Jedi Masters die, maybe when Anakin shows up, then Mace Windu and Anakin are both fighting Palpatine together, and there's different sections involving that. Then, of course, at the end, you get to see the scene, maybe a cutscene of where Palpatine uses Force Lightning on Mace Windu, and we actually get to see that in LEGO form. And, of course, we get to see one of the most significant scenes in the movie where Darth Vader, or Anakin, becomes Darth Vader under Palpatine. You know, that scene was basically not in the original game. You could kind of see it in the hologram when Obi-Wan and Yoda look at it, but you didn't get to see it in person. So I think they definitely need to include that scene in the Skywalker Saga game. And then maybe after this level, in the form of a cutscene, this wouldn't actually be gameplay, I don't think, but they could actually have a scene showing Order 66 better, because you don't really see it very good in the original game. You're kind of on the, on Kashyyyk with Yoda and the Wookiees when Order 66 is happening, so maybe they could have a cutscene kind of replicating the movies where you get to see all the Jedi getting taken out on all the different planets throughout the galaxy. I think that'd be pretty cool. You know, maybe they could, of course, change it to make it look not as dark, because Revenge of the Sith is a pretty dark movie. The LEGO games, they can't make them too dark, but they could have a scene showing all the Jedi dying across different planets or something like that in the form of a cutscene. And even if they wanted to go really dark, they could have a level where you actually play as Anakin and you're killing the younglings in the Jedi Temple. I don't know how they could spin this to make it a little bit less dark. That would be interesting if they actually had a scene where you're taking out different Jedis in the Jedi Temple as Anakin, but I don't know if they'd willing to go that dark for a LEGO game, but we'll have to wait and see. Okay, so the last big scene I'd like to see from Episode 3, of course, is the Yoda versus Palpatine or Darth Sidious fight. This is another big scene I can't believe they didn't include in the original games, because this is one of the biggest scenes in the movie. You know, the #1 Jedi versus the #1 Sith. So I think they could do this maybe. So in the original game, you have the last level called Darth Vader, where you're fighting Obi-Wan and or you're playing as Obi-Wan or Anakin. You're kind of fighting each other. So I'm thinking they could maybe expand this to where it's just like the movie, where the Yoda versus Palpatine fight is going on at the same time as the Obi-Wan versus Anakin fight on Mustafar. So in the more recent LEGO games, I believe it was introduced in the Clone Wars game back in 2011, and it's been used in the Lord of the Rings game, I know, as that's the game I've been playing currently right now. But in the levels, basically they have two things going on at the same time, and you can kind of switch between the characters, even though they're occurring in completely different areas or completely different worlds. So in the Clone Wars game, I remember you could switch between Anakin and Obi-Wan despite them being in completely different rooms, but they're kind of doing things to help out each other, so I think they could do something similar to that here to make it just like the movies where both fights are happening at the same time. you can maybe have one co-op partner playing as Yoda fighting Palpatine, then you can have another co-op partner playing as Obi-Wan fighting Anakin. And both of these could be going on at the exact same time, just like the movie. And if you're playing alone, you would switch between Yoda, and then you would fight Palpatine with Yoda, and then after you get done, finishing that section, then it would switch back to Obi-Wan. You can maybe switch back and forth. Or if you're playing co-op, it would literally both be happening at the exact same time, which would be awesome. And they could have a segment where you're playing as Yoda, and you have to block Palpatine's Force Lightning or something like that by slamming on a button. And you could have multiple segments, and then maybe there's a segment where, Palpatine starts throwing those little Senate chairs at Yoda, and then Yoda has to throw it back. They could definitely replicate all of this into a LEGO game, and this would all be happening simultaneously with the Mustafar fight, which I assume would be much expanded to what it was in the original Complete Saga and original video game. So then moving on to episode 4, one thing I'd like to see, this is just kind of brief from the original trilogy that we didn't get to play in the original trilogy game, was the Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan fight on the Death Star. So I think we could definitely see this in the game. In the game it was just happening in the background, you actually didn't get to play it, but I feel like that's a kind of significant scene not to be playable, so maybe as part of that level in the Skywalker Saga, they could have it to where you're switching to Obi-Wan, you actually have to do a brief fight with Darth Vader, or something like that, or maybe just make it a better cutscene, like make it a cutscene with dialogue and everything up close, because it was just kind of seen in the background in the original game. But other than that, I think that's about it for the things I'd like to see in the Skywalker Saga in terms of story that was in the movies that did not appear in the original Complete Saga game or the games that make up the Complete Saga, if that makes sense. But anyway, are there any scenes from these movies that you'd like to see in the game that they didn't put in the games originally that you'd like to see in the Skywalker Saga? Let me know. I think this covers the main ones. I know a lot of people want to see the Mace Windu and Palpatine fight, and the Yoda versus Palpatine fight. But again, I'd like to see stuff like Darth Maul and Tatooine and some stuff from Episode 2. And other things like that. So if you agree with my list, please give this video a like. It really helps me out. And subscribe to be notified when new videos will come out. We're always coming out with new LEGO content. We're covering Skywalker Saga pretty in-depth right now, as well as making videos covering the mini-kits in the Complete Saga game. But we're going to be covering other LEGO games as well. We got LEGO Marvel and some other different series in the LEGO game series. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.